1080p screen, 120 FPS, new Mario Kart, new 3D Donkey Kong, Bloodborne 2, and Silksong? There was a lot to like about the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, but then there's everything else that happened afterwards. Let's get into it. First off, I think that the Direct itself was good. $450 for the system and that new dock is pretty reasonably priced, all things considered. The Switch 2 has a solid lineup of games. You're going to be able to play enhanced Switch 1 games. And then the fact that we're getting GameCube games on the expansion pass is a huge win. But then after the Direct, we started to learn things about the Switch 2, particularly the price of Switch 2 games. Particularly Mario Kart World. Yes, Mario Kart World is going to be $80. 80 US dollars. $80 is obviously an increase from the $70 that I guess the industry just kind of adopted as the standard now. Even $70 is a bit pricey in my opinion. And then we have Mario Kart 8 being 80. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, it looked good, but did it look $80 good? I don't think so. Now I know that there is a bundle with the Nintendo Switch 2 and Mario Kart World that's going to be $500. So if you look at it from that perspective, if you get that bundle, the game is $50. But still, this sets a dangerous precedent for the industry having a standalone game being $80. However, this $80 price is not going to apply to every single Switch 2 game. For example, Donkey Kong Bonanza is going to be $70. The Bravely Default Remake is going to be $40. Then there's something like Street Fighter 6, which has all the DLC in it, is going to be $60. But there's a different problem with that game. We'll get into that. The point is, the video game prices are, you know, kind of all over the place. Most of it's going to be the 70 and below that we're kind of used to. But now we have that $80 ceiling, and that is not a good look. That's not a good standard to set, because you and I both know for a scientific fact that if this game does well at $80, there's going to be a ton of other video game companies, publishers trying to put out their games for $80. And then next thing you know, that's just going to be the new norm. Me personally, I think there's a little bit of an overreaction here. People are acting like every single Switch 2 game is going to be $80. That's misinformation. That's simply not true. But at the same time, I would rather have this overreaction than people just sitting by and accepting the game being $80 and then that becoming the new norm going forward. The next big issue that needs to be talked about are game key cards, which is basically just a middle finger to people that buy physical games. For those of you who don't know, game key cards are basically physical Switch 2 games. The physical cartridges, you get the cartridge, but the game is not on the cartridge. You basically put it in, and then it just gives you a download code, a digital copy of that game. So you have your physical card that has nothing on it. You have to download the whole game. And yeah, this is weird, makes no sense. Switch 1 did have something pretty similar to this, where some games like partially would be on the cartridge and then you have to download the rest. And this is basically like the next step of that. And kind of similar to the $80 price tag, there's a bit misinformation going on here, where people are just saying that every Switch 2 game is this game key card. That is not the case. It is a couple titles like that Street Fighter 6 I mentioned earlier, and actually the Bravely Default that I mentioned earlier. Like Street Fighter 6 like might have been believable because it's Street Fighter 6, it's a big game, has all the DLC, but then you have a 3DS remake that's like 10, 11 gigabytes. You couldn't put that on the cartridge. Like, really, Square Enix? And in some ways, I do think this is a bit more egregious than the $80 Mario Kart World. The $80 is very upfront. It is very in your face to an extent. The game keycard is too. There's like very clear labeling on the physical packaging of these things. But at the same time, it's like if you're buying a physical product, you're expecting the thing to be on the thing you're buying, right? If you're buying a physical game, you're expecting that the game is going to be on the game cartridge, and it's not. So in my opinion, this is like a little more deceptive. Hopefully this doesn't become too normal across physical games, but who knows with the way things are going, if maybe physical games are just going to be for display only. So those are the two main controversies around the Switch 2 right now. And I think the third biggest one is the battery life. The Switch 2, they claim that it has 2 to 6 hours of battery life. And then some gaming outlets are kind of misrepresenting this, saying that, oh, it's less than Switch 1, where it's like, technically, yes. The day one model of the Switch 1 had 2.5 to 6.5 hours of battery life. But then when you consider how much more powerful that the Switch 2 is, capable of doing 1080p in handheld mode, 120 FPS, or 4K when docked. All this stuff. It's like losing out on that 30 minutes is like a pretty fair trade-off, but it's being misrepresented in some of the media outlets where they're saying that it's half the battery life of the Switch 1, where they're using the V2 models and the Switch OLED as the baseline, where those are like 4 hours or more. And kind of yes, but no. It's still pretty much in line with the day one version of the first Switch. And then all the other complaints about the system just kind of appear to be noise, in my opinion. Like, for example, Nintendo Switch 2 has that tech demo. I don't even know what it's called, but it's going to be sold separately. It's not going to be bundled in with the system. And yeah, like, we can complain, we can be mad about that, but at the same time, we had the exact same situation with the Switch 1. They had the 1-2 Switch game. It was not bundled with the system. The game was hot doo-doo stained garbage. And at the end of the day, it did not affect our enjoyment of the Switch 1. It did not affect Switch 1's sales. No one really remembers that game, cares about it, any of that stuff. And I think we're going to have the exact same situation here with this Switch 2 tech demo. And of course, there's always the pricing of accessories. This is just nothing new to gaming in general. Accessories are just insanely overpriced. That's across the board. That's how it is with Nintendo. That's how it is with Sony and Microsoft. Like, when a new system comes out, like, all the accessories are just, that's kind of par for the course at this point. I think we're all used to it, but you'll see people complaining about those prices too. I'm actually kind of surprised no one's really going on about how the Switch 2 only takes the Express micro SD cards, which are like significantly more expensive than regular micro SDs. I don't know, maybe there's just so much else going on that like people have not gotten to that particular topic yet, but I imagine later down the line that's going to become like a bigger issue. In conclusion, there's a lot to like about the Switch 2. I'm going to be getting it day one. I do think some of these issues are being blown out of proportion, but I would much rather have that than have the issues ignored completely, swept under the rug, and just have us accept all these BS practices. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Are you guys excited for the Switch 2? You're going to be getting day one? You're going to be holding off? Is this stuff blown out of proportion, or are we not mad enough? Were you not even interested in the Switch 2 at all, even after that direct? Yeah, go ahead. Let me know. I'd love to hear it.